Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. If this is your first time here, this is the podcast where we talk about real, practical ways to improve your English. No boring grammar lectures, just honest conversation. I'm your host, David, and today, I am not alone. I've got two amazing guests with me. First, let me introduce Sarah. Sarah, why don't you tell everyone a little about yourself?
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I've been an English teacher for over 8 years now. I've taught students from all over the world, from complete beginners who couldn't say a single sentence to advanced students preparing for university exams. So today, I'm here to share some teaching insights and, honestly, some things I wish more of my students knew from day one.
Perfect. And our second guest is someone really special because he's not a teacher. He's someone who actually went through the whole journey of learning English as an adult. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Yeah, so a little about me. I didn't grow up speaking English at all. I started learning when I was 23 years old, and honestly, in the beginning, I was terrible. I mean, really, really bad. But now, here I am, speaking comfortably on a podcast. So I think that says something about the journey.
That's exactly why I wanted you both here today. Sarah brings the teaching knowledge, and Alex, you bring the real experience of actually living through it. So today's topic is something a lot of our listeners ask about all the time. Easy ways to learn English. We're going to break this down into a few parts. First, why English is actually easier than people think. Then the best way to start, some tips and tricks, and finally, a roadmap you can follow to actually master it. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with something that might surprise people. Sarah, a lot of learners think English is one of the hardest languages out there. Is that actually true?
Honestly, not really, and I say this as someone who has taught many different language speakers. English has a few things going for it that make it easier than people assume. First, English grammar, especially compared to languages with complicated verb conjugations or grammatical gender, is actually quite simple. You don't have to memorize 10 different verb endings for one verb, like in some languages.
Right, like in English. I walk, you walk, we walk, they walk. It barely changes.
Exactly. It only changes a little bit, like he walks or she walks. Compare that to languages where every single pronoun has a completely different verb form. English is actually very forgiving in that sense.
Can I add something here? From my personal experience, the thing that made English feel easier once I got past the beginning stage was that so much of it is already around us. Movies, music, social media, video games, English is everywhere. So even without trying super hard, you're already being exposed to it constantly.
That's such a good point. It's not like you're learning a language in isolation. It's basically already part of your daily life if you live in today's world.
Exactly, and that exposure matters so much for language learning. The more your brain hears a language naturally, the more familiar the patterns become, even before you consciously study them.
What about vocabulary, though? I feel like English has a huge vocabulary. Doesn't that make it harder?
It's true. English does have a large vocabulary, but here's the secret. You don't need to know every word. Studies show that knowing around 2,000 of the most common English words allows you to understand the majority of everyday conversations. You don't need a dictionary-level vocabulary to function well in English.
That was actually really comforting for me to learn early on. In the beginning, I thought I needed to know thousands and thousands of words before I could even have a basic conversation. But once I realized I just needed the common, everyday words, it felt so much more achievable.
So basically, English looks scary from far away, but once you get close, it's a lot more manageable than people think.
Exactly. The fear is usually bigger than the actual difficulty.
Okay, so let's say someone is listening right now, and they are a true beginner. They don't know where to start. Sarah, as a teacher, what's the very first step you would recommend?
The very first step, before grammar, before vocabulary lists, before anything else, is to focus on listening. A lot of people make the mistake of starting with grammar books, but listening trains your ear to recognize the sounds and rhythm of the language. Babies learn this way too. They listen for months before they ever speak a word.
So you're saying don't even worry about speaking at first.
Not exactly, don't worry about it, but don't put pressure on yourself to speak perfectly right away. Build your listening first. Watch shows, listen to podcasts like this one, even if you don't understand everything. Your brain is absorbing patterns even when you don't realize it.
I can confirm this from experience. When I started, I watched English shows with subtitles in my own language first, just to get used to the sound of English. Then, after a few weeks, I switched to English subtitles. That small shift made a huge difference.
That's such a practical tip. What about actual studying? Like, should beginners start with a textbook, an app, a class?
Honestly, it depends on the person, but I usually recommend a mix. Apps are great for building daily habits because they're quick and accessible. But apps alone won't make you fluent. You need real conversation practice too, even if it's just a little bit each day.
For me, I used an app for vocabulary. But the real turning point was when I started talking to people, even badly, even with mistakes. I joined some online conversation groups, and even though I was nervous, that's when my English actually started improving fast.
That actually leads perfectly into something I wanted to ask. A lot of beginners are scared to speak because they're afraid of making mistakes. What would you both say to that?
Mistakes are not just normal, they're necessary. As a teacher, when a student makes a mistake, I don't see failure. I see information. It tells me exactly what to help them with. The biggest language learning myth is that mistakes are something to avoid. In reality, you cannot become fluent without making lots and lots of mistakes along the way.
Honestly, I used to feel embarrassed every time I made a mistake speaking English. But once I changed my mindset and started seeing mistakes as just part of learning, not something shameful, my confidence improved so much faster than my actual English skill did at first.
That's powerful. Confidence sometimes comes before the skill, not after.
That's exactly right. Confidence and consistency are honestly more important than natural talent when it comes to learning a language.
All right, let's get into some practical tips and tricks. I want each of you to share at least 2 or 3 things that really helped, either as a teacher watching students succeed or as a learner going through it yourself. Sarah, you go first.
Sure. My first tip is what I call the 5-minute rule. Instead of trying to study for 1 or 2 hours and burning out, commit to just 5 minutes a day, every day. 5 minutes of vocabulary, 5 minutes of listening. Something small but consistent. Consistency beats intensity every single time in language learning.
I like that, because 5 minutes feels so doable. Nobody can say, I don't have time for 5 minutes.
Exactly, that's the whole point. My second tip is to learn phrases, not just individual words. Instead of memorizing the word interested alone, learn the full phrase I'm interested in. That way, you're not just learning vocabulary. You're learning how to actually use it in real sentences.
That makes so much sense, because a lot of people memorize words, but then don't know how to put them into a sentence naturally.
Right? And my third tip, use what you already know. If you love cooking, watch cooking videos in English. If you love football, watch football commentary in English. Combine learning English with something you already enjoy, so it doesn't feel like a chore.
Great tips. Alex, what about you? What worked for you personally?
My first tip is something I call shadowing. It's where you listen to a sentence in English, then immediately repeat it out loud, trying to copy the exact pronunciation and rhythm. I did this every single day with short video clips, and it helped my pronunciation and listening at the same time.
That's such a smart technique because you're training your mouth and your ears together.
Exactly. My second tip is to keep a small notebook, or even notes on your phone, of new words or phrases you hear in real life, not from a textbook, but from real conversations, videos, or songs. Write them down and review them once a day, because words you discover yourself stick in your memory much better than words from a list someone else made.
That's true. There's something about discovering a word yourself that makes it stick.
My last tip, and honestly the most important one, is to talk to yourself in English. I know it sounds strange, but when I was alone, I would describe what I was doing in English. Even simple things like, "Now I am making coffee," or "I'm walking to the store." It sounds silly, but it trains your brain to think directly in English, instead of always translating from your first language.
That's actually a fantastic tip, and there's real research behind it. Translating in your head slows down your speaking a lot. The goal is to eventually think in English directly, and practicing alone, like Alex described, is one of the best ways to build that skill without any pressure or embarrassment.
I love that. Okay, last category. Let's talk about the actual roadmap. If someone wants to go from a complete beginner to a confident English speaker, what does that path actually look like?
Okay, so I always tell my students to think of this in stages, not as one giant mountain to climb all at once. Stage 1 is what I call the foundation stage. This is where you focus purely on the most common words and phrases, basic greetings, simple present and past tense, and a lot of listening. This stage usually takes a few months if you're consistent.
So this is basically where our first episode's content would fit, right? The basic daily conversations.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of foundation stage content. Simple, everyday, practical conversations. Stage 2 is the expansion stage. This is where you start adding more complex grammar, like different tenses, modal verbs such as should, could, might, and you start having longer conversations, not just short exchanges. Your vocabulary also expands beyond the basics into more specific topics like work, hobbies, opinions.
This was honestly the stage where I started feeling like I could actually have real conversations, not just memorized responses. It felt like a big shift in confidence.
That's a great way to describe it, because stage 2 really is where learners start feeling like English is becoming a real tool, not just a subject they're studying. Stage 3 is the fluency stage. At this point, you're not translating in your head anymore. You can express more complex ideas. You understand humor, idioms, and you can follow fast, natural conversations between native speakers without much trouble. This stage takes the longest, but it's also where learning becomes genuinely enjoyable because you start using English to actually explore things you're interested in. Books, shows, deep conversations.
And how long does this whole roadmap usually take, realistically? I know people want a number, even though I know it depends on the person.
It really does vary, but as a general guideline, with consistent daily practice, the foundation stage might take around 3 to 6 months, the expansion stage another 6 months to a year, and fluency can take 1 to 2 years of consistent exposure and practice after that. But here's the important part. You don't need to reach fluency to start enjoying real benefits. Even at the expansion stage, you can already travel, make friends, and handle most everyday situations confidently.
That's such an important point. I think a lot of learners, including myself in the beginning, thought fluency was the only goal worth celebrating. But honestly, every single stage gave me real, usable skills. I didn't need to wait years to start benefiting from learning English.
That's a great mindset shift. Progress is valuable at every stage, not just at the finish line. Let's talk about something else that I think would help a lot of our listeners. Common mistakes beginners make that maybe slow them down. Sarah, from a teaching perspective, what do you see most often?
The biggest mistake I see is what I call grammar perfectionism. Some students refuse to speak until they feel their grammar is perfect. But that day never actually comes, because language is a living skill, not a fixed test. Waiting for perfection means waiting forever.
That's such a common trap. What else?
Another common mistake is studying passively, watching videos or reading without actively engaging, like writing down new words or repeating sentences out loud. Passive studying feels productive, but it doesn't build the active skill of actually producing the language yourself.
I'll add one from personal experience. Comparing your progress to other people's progress. I used to compare myself to other learners online who seemed to be progressing faster, and it made me feel discouraged, even when I was actually doing fine. Everyone's pace is different, and that comparison was honestly more harmful than helpful.
That's such an important point, especially with social media these days, where everyone seems to be moving faster than you.
Exactly. The only progress that matters is your own progress compared to where you started.
Okay, last big topic before we wrap up, motivation. A lot of people start learning English with a lot of energy, and then after a few weeks, that energy disappears. How do you both stay consistent? Okay, last big topic before we wrap up, motivation. A lot of people start learning English with a lot of energy, and then after a few weeks, that energy disappears. How do you both stay consistent?
From a teaching perspective, I always tell my students to connect their English learning to a real, personal reason, not just a general goal like, I want to be fluent. A specific reason, like, I want to watch my favorite show without subtitles, or I want to have a real conversation with someone I admire, gives you something concrete to aim for, and that keeps motivation alive longer.
For me personally, what kept me consistent was tracking small wins. Every time I understood a sentence I wouldn't have understood a month before, I would notice it and feel proud of it, even if it seemed small. Those small moments added up over time and kept me going, especially during the times when progress felt slow.
That's such a healthy way to look at it, celebrating small wins instead of only focusing on the big, distant goal.
Exactly, and honestly, motivation will naturally go up and down. The real key isn't staying motivated all the time, it's building a habit strong enough that you keep going even on the days when motivation is low.
Well, this has been such a valuable conversation. Let's do a quick recap for everyone listening. We talked about why English is actually easier than people assume, especially because of how much exposure we already get to it. We talked about starting with listening before speaking and not being afraid of mistakes. We covered practical tips like the 5-minute rule, learning phrases instead of single words, shadowing, and talking to yourself in English. And finally, we walked through the 3-stage roadmap: foundation, expansion, and fluency, plus common mistakes to avoid and how to stay consistent long-term.
It was great being here, David. My final piece of advice to anyone listening: be patient with yourself. Language learning is not a race. It's a long-term skill that rewards consistency far more than speed.
And from someone who's actually been through this journey, I just want to say, if you're a beginner right now feeling overwhelmed, that feeling is temporary. I felt exactly the same way. And today, I'm having a full conversation in English on a podcast. If I could do it, you absolutely can too.
That's such a perfect way to end this episode. Thank you both so much for being here and sharing such valuable insight today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. If this episode helped you, please give it a like, share it with someone who's learning English, and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Until next time, keep practicing, stay consistent, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.